This is a 1970 Datsun 240Z that I'm bringing back to life. This car hadn't run in 12 to 15 years or so. Now I need to get some brakes and clutch going on it. Neither one of them work right now. The pedals go all the way to the floor. I've got on the rear here new pads, O-ring kit for the calipers, new rubber brake hose. The disc seems to be in pretty good shape, just a little rusty, so I'll bead blast that. Has Wilwood Dynalite calipers on the rear. Up front here, it's got the Wilwood Superlight calipers, and I've got a kit for that with the O-rings and a new rubber brake hose. I didn't get new pads for the front. They've got about 5/8 of an inch material on there, so I'll just reuse them. Now I'm going to tear this caliper apart, put those new seals in here. I'm going to use compressed air to blow those pistons out. I got a little piece of wood I'm going to lay right there. And if your blowgun has a rubber tip on it, you just stick it in here. Mine doesn't, so I'm going to kind of make a seal with this rag and blow through the rag. And watch for these pistons to come out against that wood. Okay. I didn't want that to come all the way out. So, let me... stick that back in just a little bit. And now I'm going to put a clamp on that one. And I'll put a piece of wood in here. Try that again. There's another one. That's 3. We're getting there. Okay, I might keep those 2 in place. One more. There we go. Okay, now I've got to get the seals out of there. And if you have a little tool like this or some little thing, you can kind of get in there and grab that rubber. Okay, now I'm gonna wash these up real good. I'm just gonna use soap and water. I'll take a little steel wool and make sure there's no debris or anything stuck inside these little cylinders here. I'll take some steel wool and clean off all this junk around the outside of the pistons, and then I can put it back together. Got everything cleaned up, washed my hands. I'm going to put a little brake fluid in this little cup here. Drop that O-ring down in there. And you just get them started in the groove, work them right on around. Just like that. When I was cleaning these caliper halves out, I made sure that all the little fluid passages running through the thing are clean and would blow air through them, no problem. Okay, now then we'll just put these in there, try and get them square, put even pressure on there, push them right on down. If they don't want to go, it may be because you don't have them kind of lined up correctly to start with, but they should push in just with hand pressure like that. What you don't want to do is start hammering on them. Put my O-rings right here. This is a low strength, removable type thread locker. Just put a little on there. Put these two halves together. And I'm going to torque these to 10 foot-pounds. Okay, I've got my little bleeder valves all cleaned up, and I made sure that the hole going through them is completely open, no restrictions there. Got my new pads in here. Okay. So that's ready to go back on there. Before I put the rotor and the caliper back on here, I'm going to go ahead and put this rubber brake hose in because I got room to get to it. And I went around to the other 3 wheels and disconnected the brake line at each wheel. And then I went up to the master cylinder and disconnected the 2 lines up there, and I was able to blow some compressed air through all the brake lines and force all the old fluid out, so that when I put it back together, why, I'll have all new fluid throughout the system. The front is basically the same as the back. I rebuilt the caliper in the same way. That's the only difference is we've got this hub with the wheel bearings on here. So I've got all these parts cleaned up. I'm going to repack the wheel bearings. Then the hub will go on the spindle and the caliper will go on very similar to the back. And I've got to replace the rubber brake line before I'll stick this stuff on there. I like to just put some in my hand and rub it in there, and then when it starts oozing out around the top, why, I know it's packed good. And here's why I like to change all the rubber brake hoses. See all these cracks in here? After a car's been sitting for a long time, why, that's what happens. So anytime I bring a car back to life, before I drive it, I replace all the rubber fuel hoses and all the rubber brake hoses, because that's 2 things you don't want to have rupture on you when you're out on the street. Everything's back together now. All 4 wheels are done. Had a little problem with this right front here. I had to get a new rotor for it. The problem was inside the caliper, one of the cylinders, there was a little damage right around the top, and it was keeping the piston from retracting at all. It would put pressure on it, push it out against the rotor, and it would just stay there putting pressure on the rotor because it wouldn't retract in that cylinder. And this rotor was worn down almost 90 thousandths. So anyway, I replaced the rotor and I got that interference cleaned up in the caliper. The piston runs nice and smooth inside there now. So hopefully there will be no issues on this right side here. Here's the master cylinder I'm putting in there. It's a Wilwood, a 1-inch piston, 1-inch diameter, designed for that disc brake setup. It's got these little ports here and these reservoirs if I want to do a remote mount. I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to take these off, and then these reservoirs will go right onto the master cylinder itself. But first, there's some residual pressure valves underneath these ports. And if you're running drum brakes, they hold a little pressure on the system, but if you're running disc brakes, you don't need it. So what you're supposed to do is take these off of there. Remove this little rubber piece and the spring, and then this goes back in there. And the only way I knew about this is instructions tell you what to do. So then you torque these back down. Use enough pressure to pull them off. There's a rubber seal right around there. Okay. Couple little fittings that I need to convert from this type of a fitting, which is here, to the metric fitting, which is on my brake lines. Okay. All right, now it's ready to go on there. I do have to modify this hole pattern a little bit. The holes on the other master cylinder are 1/16 wider center to center distance, so I've got to slot these holes about 35 thousandths on each side. So I've already got it set up. I just finished bleeding the rear brakes. Now I'm going to move to the fronts, and I'm doing this by myself. So what I'm going to do is kind of pump this up a little bit, best I can, and then I'm going to put a piece of wood here, push it down and wedge it right there against the seat. And when you bleed the brakes, you want to start at the furthest most wheel, which would be the right rear passenger side. And then I went over to the driver's side rear. Now I'm up to the fronts. This is the driver's or the passenger side front. And so I pumped them up a little bit. You can see a little bit of fluid squirting out there. There's one back here. Can't really see it too good. So I'll just crack it open. Pump them up again. Crack this back one open. And I'll just keep going back and forth on the fronts here till I get all the air out. I may have to go and do the rears one more time, but I'll just keep working around until I have all the air out and I have a good solid pedal. Get my tires back on it now. Okay, the speedometer doesn't work. Doesn't appear the tachometer is working now. Oil pressure seems to work. Amp meter, I believe, is working. Temperature gauge not working. So needs a little attention. But it is running decent. Clutch feels real good. Brakes don't feel like they've got as much pedal as they ought to have, so need some maybe adjustment at the pedal, not sure. Transmission seems to shift real nice. Well, it wasn't too bad of a first run around the block. Got a few mechanical issues to deal with, so I'll try and get those sorted out, and then it'll be on to refreshing this interior and getting the exterior looking good.